Welcome back to the Moisture Farm, everybody. Today I have a Jump to Lightspeed draft guide for you. Granted, I've only done one draft so far, but baked into my opinions on this draft guide are things that I've taken away from doing pre-releases, so like sealed and limited in general. I've got some sped up draft footage for you. I'll very quickly kind of show you what's coming in my packs, what leaders I'm choosing between, and then we've got some gameplay to follow all of that up. But before we get into that, just a couple of thoughts that I have about draft for Jump to Lightspeed in general. All right, rule number one. I don't think I've kind of touched on this before, very briefly in different videos, whether it was draft or limited. But I don't think I've very officially put it out before on the channel. Rule number one for limited: if you pull a showcase, you play the showcase. Okay, I don't care who it is. If you watch my stream. Opening Carbonites the other day, you saw I pulled the wedge showcase. If that was during draft or during limited, like, I'm playing wedge. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is obviously not, this is a local rule for us at Fire and Ice. If you pull the showcase during limited, you play the showcase. I don't care if it's Akbar, Trench, whoever it is, you play the showcase. Let's talk about the rare leaders real quick. These are obviously rare leaders, so it's not going to be very common for you to play with one of these leaders in draft. But just in case, if either of these are your options and you're not sure whether to consider them, I think playability-wise, these range pretty far. Ventress, I think, could be a little playable in draft. There's certainly some good support with her if you get some grit units or the grit pilot, or you have the card that gives you +1 for each damage, so it's like double stacking the grit keyword without saying it. That's a rare event, but could help you push some crazy amounts of damage. Or just big units that you can throw damage on to maybe ping something for removal. Or help you trade up into something. I think there's some options there, and she's playing, obviously she's a blue leader, so inherently you can play some of the good blue removal cards, Airlock, and the one where you take control and defeat it, stuff like that. Lando, if you saw one of my pre-releases, I did Lando, and I did not do very well, but there's an upside to Lando, I think, where you can draft really low on your curve, and you are curving up with his ability and giving shield to things and going wide. On top of that, if you get some really good uncommons like Gold Leader or any of just those like big tanky capital ships in space, like the 4/6 that has Restore 2 and heals 3 on defeat, those can really help with the Lando strategy. He is a 7 deploy, so like that's not great. But when he does deploy, he's a big tank sentinel. If he's piloting something like piloting Gold Leader, it's a 10/10 sentinel that's shielded. And then when it's attacked, the attacker gets -1. So like super hard to deal with. So there's consideration in Lando. Trench, I don't think is playable, especially in a 30 card deck. You're just going to burn through it. I mean, maybe, I don't know, if you have, I can't even think of like a 2-card combo that you could fish out with Trench to make the payoff. I would not draft Trench. Kaz, I think for draft purposes is you're playing a risky game because there's specific cards that I think you capitalize with on Kaz in a constructed format that in draft, I think, your odds of getting those cards aren't great, like the Fireball, I guess the Fireball is uncommon, and then there's that 4/4 ambush that's a common, so you've got a good shot there. But I don't know in a draft format if Kaz is going to do the things that people are trying to do with him in constructed, if that makes sense. And there's going to be a lot of these leaders, like the next 2 that I'll talk about, or the next 3 really. Like if you get the support for him and you get lucky, that's what draft is. Stuff like that happens in draft all the time. Piet, for example, like playing capital ships and costing 1 less. Within the set, what you can actually draft Your options for Piet aren't particularly strong. If you happen to get like a resupply carrier and then maybe like an annihilator or a executor, and you want to play blue and like stall out and maybe curve up and ramp to play those at discount and get bombs out there to win, it's a little bit of a risky strategy. I think draft games go to 8 or 9 resources pretty commonly, depending on the leader matchup. And you've got good odds to see those cards if you pull them. But, we're talking about building decks around legendaries. So for draft format, not great. But like I said, if you get the cards. Holdo, I think I'm not super sold on the resistance support. Trait synergy decks. I'm going to talk about Holdo and Phasma here since we're talking about like trait synergies. Trait synergy decks are okay and limited if you luck out and get every single piece you need, at least historically, right? CAD is like the one exception to trait synergy leaders. But like both of these remind me, like think Bo-Katan in set 2, like not great, but if you drafted like all of the Mandalorians and just started like popping off with XP and shields, that could oftentimes be tough to deal with. But like I said, you're rolling the dice. You're at the mercy of the packs, right? And the mercy of the people drafting around you. So it can be tough. I think Poe is actually one of the more workable leaders. I know my fat head is covering him up. I think Poe is one of the more workable leaders out of the rares. If you can just push damage, all you got to do is have pilots that you can flip them on. If one of your rares is a black 1, that's some real big damage you can push early. Start putting pressure on. Another rare that you could get your hands on is Eject, which obviously cheating out Poe with Eject could be pretty strong in draft. So out of the rares, I think Poe, Asajj, and Lando are the most workable, and everything else is kind of just up to the mercy of your packs, right? These are the leaders I think that you should hunt in draft if you're really looking to win games. I think these leaders are the most workable and the most powerful in general. I've talked a lot about Luke. I did a pre-release for Luke. I have a pretty high opinion on Luke in Limited, where, you flip Luke onto pretty much anything you play on the 4 or 5 resource turn. It's going to be a huge unit that can't be defeated by card abilities. All you can do is throw sentinels and throw damage to it as much as possible. Your only hope against Luke is that you're playing super aggro and are going under him before he flips, or you have all of the sentinel answers, which, as I'll talk about in a little bit, like might not even be an issue. Like in the pre-release, I flipped Luke onto the 4/4 K-Wing Saboteur. You can't even throw sentinels in front of that. It's just it becomes like an 8/9 Saboteur that's super hard to deal with. Vader, I think, is still pretty good. I talked a lot about, in my pre-release video, I talked about how some of these leaders are kind of snowball leaders, and Vader is definitely a snowball leader, where you really got to get his ability going early and get those ties going and keep that board presence. I also said in my pre-release video, and I've somewhat shifted my opinion, that Luke is like a super hard counter into Vader. And I think what I've noticed more is, while Luke's ability, like on paper, really does counter Vader, if Vader's snowball starts rolling, it's pretty hard for Luke to deal with that. So, I talked about how like a lot of that just felt like it had to do with initiative, and I think it does, but you'll see later. My thoughts have changed a little bit about this. Von Reg, I've said before, I feel like his ability is like really safe. It's not particularly strong, but it is workable. Like, you just have to draft vehicles, and if you curve out really strong, you don't even need to have like crazy rares or uncommon pulls. You just need to like curve out really well on value stats, and you'll probably do okay. In the draft that I have footage of for today, I think the person who went undefeated was running a Von Reg blue. So little different, playing some removal, probably a little bit more mid-rangey, I'd imagine, but got the job done. And Rio probably surprises somebody. Somebody watching this video is a little bit surprised about Rio. I faced a Rio blue in a pre-release that surprised me really well. The villain aspect on Rio gives it access to some really good cards depending on the shell. And I think Rio is one of those leaders that also has the potential, like with Luke, you flip this onto a transport. Like, for example, obviously this would be tough in draft, but like the Fire Spray, the new Fire Spray S card, you flip Rio onto that, it's 8/9 Sentinel. Because it's a transport, it's going to get a +1 buff. With Rio stats, it gets 5 on the tail, those are just huge stats. And so the only way you can deal with Rio flipping on a big transport is like you just have to throw damage on it. It's a leader unit. So much of the removal in this set and the upgrade removal is non-leader specific. So Rio flipping onto something big is just really, really tough to deal with. And so you run into the same issues you do if you're playing against a Luke. These leaders, I think, are particularly, they're easy to work, and have, I think, some of the biggest upside if you draft around them. This is a rehashed slide from my pre-release video, talking about just quality commons, things to look for in drafts. The Phoenix A-Wing is a great turn 1. The TIE Bomber is a great turn 1 for villainy. Shoot Down is really good removal. It's tempo and control both at the same time. It's fantastic. And the Guerrilla Leader, a good turn 2 play. The 3 indirect, and it gets to ready if the odds of, if you have initiative and you play this on turn 2, the odds of this unit readying are super strong. So I definitely look for this card in your draft. Ambush and removal, you'll hear a lot about that in multiple pre-release guides, how this is one of the best ways you can stay a leg up on your opponent. And I think these are probably the best cards that accomplish that. Blue Leader is one of the best cards in the set. You can trigger the ambush and remove something and then give it the 2 experience and move it to the ground, or take out something for 5 on the ground. Lots of ways to work this, and it feels really good to play this card. The 4/1 ambush, the Eager Escort Fighter, obviously not a particularly strong card. It pretty much dies to anything. The one cool thing about this card with Lando was there was a couple times where I was able to trigger Lando to give this thing a shield and then ambush it, so it at least survives, and then my opponent has to ping it or get rid of it, take an action or do something and get rid of it. So that's nice, but even just having 3 to ambush something in space can be nice. The Corporate Light Cruiser, I think, is a great card for draft. If you decide to play yellow in Piet for whatever reason, you can get this out for 5. It's going to survive pretty much anything. The Contracted Hunter, you're just paying 3 for removal unless you're playing Kaz for, you got lucky and you're playing Kaz and that thing can survive. No Glory only results. It is a rare, but it's one of the best removal cards in the set. One of the better removal cards that's come out lately. I mean, it's just a way better version of Vanquish. I was playing against somebody the other day that used this to take control of my Chewbacca piloted unit, and then it stayed alive because it couldn't get defeated by the card ability. That might have been a Carabas glitch. If that does work that way, actually, that's nuts. Out of Airlock is great. -5/-5. System Shock is really good, especially in certain matchups that are trying to get a lot of pilots out. Defeat that upgrade and get the ping, all for 1 cost. That's just good value. And Piercing Shot, paying 3 for 3 damage a lot of the times, and ignoring any shields that may or may not be on the unit. That's just good removal. These are the cards that I would consider to be the bombs of this set. Cards that as soon as they hit the mat have severe implications on your win probability. Planetary Bombardment is a really good card, especially if it's set up, if you've got the capital ship and even better if it's set up to where you have the capital ship and your opponent has a mostly empty board. In that situation, they're taking 10 to 12 damage to face. It can be really brutal. If you have the card below it out first, and you can just assign that damage, with Devastator, obviously that's pretty crazy. Those two cards together. I put Chewbacca in this category because there's very specific removal required to get rid of Chewbacca. Otherwise, a lot of the times it's just, depending on what he's piloting or on the ground, even like you're talking about a 5 to 8 damage unit that, you have to get rid of. I think on the ground, more specifically, you just have to throw damage or sentinels in front of it to try and stop him. It can be very difficult to deal with. I think Turbo Laser Salvo is probably the biggest bomb you can pull in this set. It curves really nicely, like with these 6-drop leaders that I think are particularly stronger, or anything that you're piloting, right? If you're piloting your leader on something, odds are it's going to be 6, 7, 8 power on the unit. So when you curve into this, and you're pretty much wiping someone's side of the board, which can mean eliminating their leader. It's just a board wipe that completely wins you the game. Devastator, talked about it a little bit already. What I'll say about the capital ships down here, Devastator, Annihilator, and Executor, is that obviously they're pretty high cost. They come out late in the game, so you have to kind of set this up and stabilize to have the impact with these cards that you want, which can be tough. It might not be like the most reliable thing, but odds are you're going to see these cards. It's a 30 card deck. If you're able to stabilize this long, you're almost guaranteed to see these cards if you're playing them. So in that regard, if you can get them out, they're pretty nasty. It's just about being able to stabilize and get to that point. So from there, let's go into my deck building or my drafting. Show you pretty quickly like the cards that I'm thumbing through and the leaders I'm choosing between, and pull out some games to show you some footage. All right, we'll play this at 1.5 speed to kind of show you quickly. I know there's going to be a little bit of a glare. I think I can commentate around it. So Von Reg's going to be the first leader. If you've never drafted before for this game, what we're going to do is we're just going to pull out the leaders and bases for each of these packs. We're going to draft those first, so we'll keep one and pass them until everyone's been passed and has 3 leaders again. So we'll do this 3 times. I'm definitely thinking Luke here. Luke, as I mentioned, is just really strong. Really, really tough to deal with when he's on the board. Akbar and Thrawn are my next options. I'll pass away the Akbar, and then Von Reg will be the last one handed to me. So these are my leaders that I'm choosing to build around. And this is one of the reasons why I like draft so much for this game, is that you have a direction right off the bat. Whatever you see in your pack, if you get a really good rare legendary, you've got to consider whether or not you just value pick that, even if it doesn't match up with the synergy for either of your leaders. Or, if you can, in your head, just kind of decide whether or not this actually fits into playing this deck. We'll get started here. So I'm thumbing through this pretty quickly. So for Luke, obviously to trigger his ability, I'm looking for fighters. Black 1 is my rare. That's a perfect 2-3 turn 1 play that gets bigger when it's piloted. That's perfect for me. Easy choice. And Luke is super easy to draft for. Like, you're just looking for fighters. There's so many fighters in bulk that have good stats, that are good values. Even commons, like there's a 3-4 Restore 2. That's great. The 4-4 Saboteur K-Wing. That's my favorite thing to put Luke onto. And there it is right there. So you're like, I'm looking through this, and it's pretty easy. Like, I'm looking for good fighters and good removal. I'm looking for shoot down. I have access to shoot down. I'm looking for system shock, the cheap upgrade removal, and just other damage abilities. Ideally, I'm looking for, I haven't decided yet and drafted 2 red cards, so I'm thinking maybe green or yellow or even blue, depending on, what comes my way. I've got the thing that buffs fighters. I like that. That was a really good pack for me. Really tough choice here, because I've also got the Phoenix and Sabine's Masterpiece. Went ahead and took Sabine. That's a really, really strong rare. That was a tough pack. I could have gone a couple different ways. They're having the strong turn 1 with the Phoenix A-Wing, or having the thing that buffs my fighters. I like that card. It's a 1 cost, so a lot of, like, turn 2, you can play another good 2-drop fighter if you have one, and then you can play that to meet your curve. So I took the tank there. Not particularly strong fighters in that pack. Just pump my mic. Not the strongest fighters in that pack, but the tank is an option to flip Luke onto that could be really, really disgusting. So keeping that in mind. The War Juggernaut is another thing to keep your eye out for. The Assault Frigate is really good too, but I like having that restore fighter in there. Getting the most out of these fighters. Want to make sure I have a good base, especially on this first pack. Once I get into like the second and third packs, if I've got plenty of fighters, then I can start thinking about, splashing maybe something even out of aspect, or playing something else. That's a solid turn 1 fighter there. Definitely need that at this stage of draft. But yeah, once I get to that second and third pack, I can start thinking about like the MC30 or 230 or whatever, the 5/5 overwhelm raid 1. You're gonna see a lot of swarming vulture droids. I'm gonna spoil that for you right now. These packs were absolutely loaded with vulture droids. Not the best pack for me to pick something. I kind of like Sham just for stats. If, God forbid I whiff on a fighter or don't have like the strongest way to curve on my 4 resource turn, having a Sham like a 5/4 on the ground can like really shake up the game. Once again, like not a particularly strong pack for me. There's X-Wings and there's the Sentinel card, but I went ahead and took that little ground vehicle, like the 3/4 thing that you can maybe cheap out for earlier. There's that 6/7 Jedi thing. That's a capital ship, so the fighter thing doesn't really support there. So I just went with another Sham. Worst case scenario, I just resource that. The resupply carrier is interesting for me there. Another relatively weak pack. Taking Fireball, just, I don't know, maybe splash it, or, worst case scenario, I just have another copy of Fireball to play into one of my yellow decks when I take it home. Another just kind of pretty much pigeon-toed into drafting that tank again. So, got off to a hot start a little bit. Took a Swarming Vulture Droid there as kind of my only option. And the second half of drafting this first pack kind of fizzled out. Dorsal Turret is playable if I'm, set on going green. I always count my cards to make sure that I've, you want to make sure you get 14 cards before you think you're done with the pack. Make sure everyone has 14 cards so we didn't mess up the draft at all. So now the pack is coming from the other way, and I have to consider across from me. I believe that's my boy Ryan sitting across from me. He's got a Rio, Vader, and Poe to choose from. So statistically, it's more likely that he's drafting for villainy, but he may be all set on going for Poe. You can see I got the legendary AT Hauler there, but I'm not really running yellow for this. I'm not a legendary that I'm like super, gung-ho to try to get. So I draft a shoot down. Just a really important card. I'm probably going to try and gobble up as many of those as I can. Best card for me in this, I mean, I've got that 6-drop does damage equal to card in hand. I'm not particularly high on that card, but if I double my odds of getting a K-Wing to flip Luke onto, I'm much more interested on that. Now I have 2 copies in a 30-card deck, so I feel pretty good about that. And then the 4-1 Ambush, I think just another removal option for me. Or even, just play it without the ambush at a certain stage of the game and set it up for maybe if I find a cool pilot later on, or just having to have a 4 damage threat on the board that, kind of late in the game my opponent has to think about. I do like that Resistance Squadron, that green-white one right there. It's definitely my best choice in that pack. But I do like that card. You get a chance at, like, it's not often going to be a removal card, but you're going to get some sort of damage value out of it. And then if it's set up with Luke, maybe, do 2 damage to, like, something with 4 or something with 3, and then you can ping it away with Luke. Can feel nice. Not a particularly strong pack for me, but a piercing shot could be super helpful. Removing something that there's that 1/3/2 with 2 shields that I don't particularly like. This pack does pretty much nothing for me, and I don't even remember what I took here. I think I definitely consider just value picking the fire spray just to have another copy, or that dorsal turret. I went with the 2/2 fighter. I don't really like that card. I think maybe I was just not super solid about my turn 1 fighters yet. And this time I think I go Vulture Droid, I want to say. I know I already have 1, so I'm just thinking the upside of the Vulture Droid versus taking another one of those. Maybe I set up 2 Vulture Droids on the board. Another pack that's pretty weak for me. That pilot is kind of my best shot, or I've got the evasive maneuver. Maybe if I just need to exhaust something big. But like I said, even though these packs are not like super, super strong for me and I'm not getting like crazy pulls, I know I have a good foundation of fighters, and that support alone is going to serve me well piloting Luke. As long as those things can, make attacks, I can throw pings around, and gives me an option to put Luke onto something, and that combo. Just having Luke as a pilot on a fighter, it does really good things for you. I do like the twin laser turret. I've gotten greedy a couple times and put a twin laser turret on something that Luke was piloting, so you're just throwing a whole bunch of damage around. The hotshot maneuver is kind of interesting. It's a cheap event that when Luke is piloting something, like, you might be able to get 2 triggers out of that. For every on-attack trigger, you do 2 damage to something, and then you attack with the unit. So, if I have Luke on, anything that has its own trigger, then I get to throw 4 damage around and then use Luke's trigger to throw more damage around. So, that card could get pretty nasty. Even if I had the twin laser turret on, it's like, all right, do 4 damage, then do 1 damage to something else, and then do 3 more with Luke. It just gets out of hand like crazy. Absolutely crazy. Air superiority, I'm down to the last couple cards in the pack, so you're never going to get something really optimized for you here. So going into the last pack, I know I've got a good base of fighters. I can start looking for something maybe to splash or something that, can really shake things up for me. Got a Space Sentinel. There's the Frigate. And that rare sucks. That's my least favorite rare in the game. And then I've got the 1-drop that buffs my fighters. there's a couple ways I can go here. I've also got that ambush speeder. That's not great. I went with the frisk. If I would have done that again, I probably would have taken the frigate or the other one. Attack run could be a nice tempo play for me. I like stay on target though. You get the damage buff and you don't lose the card advantage. Could be really nice to start, stealing games away. As much as I don't like, I have so many Radises already. Red-Eye. As much as I didn't want to draft that card, I thought, yeah, maybe bring in something real big to kind of pose a threat late game. I have a couple resistance cards that if they happen to be on the board, it'll be a Sentinel, and then, maybe trade into something to help stabilize in a worst case scenario type situation. This pack, yeah, I've got the piercing shot, so, more removal is good for me. I really like red removal in this set. Feels really good to play. Feels like good value. The system shock is great. Coming down to the last pack. Looking for something crazy. And I get my blue leader, which absolutely I'll take that. One of the best cards I could possibly get for what I'm building here. Blue leader, it's just so versatile. Such a good card. It's gonna go in any deck that's honestly it might just be like a green white staple at this point. It's just so good. Any deck running that shell, I think, really has to consider that. Another pack that, I get the system shock here. I think that's my best pick for sure. I could, the Corellian Freighter that like, I think it's like a 4/5 Sentinel or something. This pack is a lot better for my fighters. I went with the A-Wing rather than the Resistance one, I think, because I don't have as many pilots as I would like to consider that card. Another system shock, but then the 2-drop, 2/1 Sentinel fighter. It's not great. Maybe you should have gone with another system shock there, but I like my options there. So now we're really heating up here. We got a red 5 here. That was a good pack too. Red 5 is one of the better combos with Luke as well, because you can organize those triggers right. So you can do Luke first and hit something for 3, and then you can trigger red 5 to do something to a damaged unit. Or if there's something already damaged, you remove that and then do 3. You might be able to take out 2 things at once. That's just really solid. Got my 1-drop guy that buffs my fighters. I like that. In this situation, took the thing that readies something. A couple duds left here. Ryan's free card is going to be a blue Sentinel guy. And so that's what I've got. we saw a lot of good fighters come across, a lot of good red removal. I feel pretty good about this draft as far as, my chances to win here. I'm definitely building Luke Green. I think I might have cut the footage for, I guess I showed the deck building part, but yeah, as you can see, I've got a lot of good stuff here. Laying it out by costs just to make sure I've got a good curve, something that makes sense. You want definitely want a lot of options turn 1, a lot of 2-drops, and then 3-drops as well. You want a good amount of, you get good value playing 2, 3-drops a lot of the times. That glare is really nasty. I think that's the foil tank maybe. Oh, there's a foil tank. It was so much glare I couldn't even tell what was on that one. So as this is shaping up right now, this is a pretty typical curve for me. This is what I like to play with draft, where, the bell curve kind of peaks, between 2 and 4, and then I've got some 1-drops to throw in. And then, a lot of times I curve out a little higher, just kind of depends on what deck I'm playing. But yeah, now I'm starting to count cards, see what I need to splash in to either or cut out whatever to hit right at 30 cards. I like to stay right at 30, sometimes 31, 32, but it has to be a pretty significant card. Might splash 31. I like the electromagnetic pulse. That 3-drop, it would be a 3-drop for me, splashing it in. Does 2 to a droid or vehicle and exhaust it. So, yep, just round out the curve here, but this is the deck. Let's jump into some games. All right, so first round is against a wedge blue. My man Matt sitting across from me. So I'm definitely going to pay attention to my system shocks. Get rid of those nasty upgrades. Wedge blue is not something I've had a lot of experience against, but I know that those blue pilots can kind of make for big, gnarly restore tanky units, so I definitely do not want to deal with those. I do feel like with wedge blue and like this shell, I feel like I can play pretty tempo. He goes with Hera turn 1. I've got my 3-2 A-Wing, which is nice for me. And he will obviously start with initiative here. He'll probably play something before he swings Hera just so that he can actually get value out of that restore. Ideally, even removing my turn 1 play would be clutch for him. I don't know if he's got it, though. I think he's soft pass for me, and I'll kind of make him pay for that by doing a stay on target. So go into base for 5. And then curve out with the 0-4. That buffs my fighters. We like that. Doing the Luke trigger for that thing. I think he's deciding whether or not he actually wants to trigger his ability for it, knowing that I can ping it and get it down to 1. That actually determines whether or not I want to take initiative. He does not put any damage on it to draw the card, so I will Luke ping so that he can't make a value trade there. But then he goes ahead and puts a pilot on it, so that changes my math a little bit. And go ahead and just claim. Good thing is I can use this 0-4 guy to trade up into that. I think it's 6 and it's been dealt 5. Or excuse me, it's been dealt 1, so it's 5 left to kill. And I can buff the A-Wing to a 5 to take it out. So definitely don't mind doing that here if it'll help me build up to something I can flip Luke onto. So that's going to be my first action here. I think most definitely where I can trade up there. Feels pretty good. Don't have any issues about that. He's going to swing Hera, put 2 damage on that thing and restore. Doesn't, not taking any damage back from it, so just kind of evens things out. And play a red 5. That feels pretty good. And he can respond with the 4-drop that's going to ping red 5 for 1, turn it into a 3-3. And I think I'm just claiming at this point. I know he's tapped out. He could play a 1-drop pilot for free. But I didn't want to chance that and have him have first action to swing into red 5 without any, while being able to survive that. Didn't want that to happen. So I can trade into that again if I want, or, find something, other ways to go around it. I want to have spaceport almost all to myself. For Luke to pilot something and not have a lot of stuff to go through. That is really what I want to set up with this deck. I know I've got damage I can trade into that if I want to, and instead I'll play a little 2-1 Sentinel. He'll go ahead and take out the 0-4, which is fine. And now I can kind of play around this if I want to. I can wait to swing in red 3 If I have something else to play, which I've got 3 resources up, if I wait for red 3, I can have damage on that leader. He is in his wedge flip turn, though. A piercing shot, Hera. See what he wants to do here. If he flips wedge onto the leader, I can, he's still going to have to swing into the Sentinel. I'll probably just swing in red 5 here and claim initiative. We're knotted up at 2 damage each on base. He decides to swing without piloting wedge, and then I immediately will just swing in red 3 and take that out, not give him any piloting options here. I know he wants to set up something else. You can see the red leader in his hand. He likes that. That'll give him a great option for the wedge flip. I've been testing wedge, and yeah, red leader is a super important card for wedge. Ideally, it happens a turn earlier, but now he's going to set up the wedge flip and make himself a token. I think he might just use a face down card here. I don't know if he kept any of his tokens. So that face down card is going to represent an X-Wing, and we'll go to phase. Now the red leader can swing in for 6 with wedge piloting. And with Luke piloting the red 5, I think I'll have, 4, so 8 damage to swing around. So having Luke first action flip here, I don't feel particularly bad about. It can't be defeated with card abilities, so nothing in that blue shell will have any answers to this. He's going to have to just throw damage into it if he wants to stop it, or try to out-tempo me with his, which I don't see happening. Definitely a pivotal decision for Matt here. He'll go ahead and swing the red leader. If he swings it into me, then I'll have some good options here. He decides to swing it into base. And now I have to decide how I want to set up my Luke trigger on attack here. I think it makes the most sense for me to just swing into base and take out that X-Wing with the Luke trigger. But maybe I forgot to do that. Did I misplay that? Okay, no. I used Luke. I used Luke to put 3 onto red leader, and then organize the red 5 trigger to go on red leader. So, and then I'll finish him off with blue leader. So that works out for me. Even though he gets 2 damage onto the tie, but that is perfectly fine with me. His leader's out, my leader's in. I like where I stand there. Gold leader's a pretty solid card to bring out right here. That 5/5 shielded gives him some options here. I don't think it's enough to, let's see. It is enough to remove my red 5, I think, or 9 minus 3 is 6. Okay, so he's one short of removing me right now with that. And I'll just use Luke's ability to pop that shield, and red 5, there's no targets for that trigger, so just getting in some damage, trying to pull away with this game at this point. That's what Luke's all about. Something big to flip onto, and you just try to pull away and use those abilities to control the board. Feels pretty nice when you remove like multiple things, with especially that combo with red 5. 2 damage there, 3 damage there, feels pretty good. Lays down a Sentinel. I'll put in the Y-Wing, indirect Y-Wing, to bolster up my spaceport a little bit more. You can see he's got a page in his hand, and I think he wants to get me to a spot where I think the reason why he chose Sentinel first was maybe for me to play something into that and then be out of resources to interact with that. But I do have the System Shock in my hand, which will defeat Page and do a 1-2. The the gold leader, and then he's going to decide whether or not he wants to just throw that damage into Luke or not. And he decides to take out the Y-Wing. So it'll have, gold leader will have 2 damage on him. And this is an ideal situation for me. I do have, looks like 4 resources up for me to do something else. And I'll play the Frisk, try to go a little bit wider, and he responds to it really well with the 3/3 shielded. So this definitely put up a matching front on the ground. And I'll start by immediately shooting down. Now my question here, I kind of sit here for a minute trying to decide what I want to shoot down. Do I want to shoot down the Sentinel, or do I want to shoot down the gold leader? Gold leader still does not have enough to trade in, I believe, right? Because 4, 5, 9 minus 3, 6. So yeah, he's still 1 short of gold leader on its own being able to take me out. And I know if I choose the Sentinel to get rid of, as long as he doesn't replay another Sentinel, I can start putting more pressure into base. And now I can take out gold leader on this next phase. He's going to go ahead and take out Frisk, and then it's going to be a really easy swing for me here and throw all that damage onto gold leader. And take that out. Stay in control of space. He's going to play that guy, but it's a scoop for him. No response. Nothing that'll stop Luke going forward. So ended up winning 2-0 in this matchup. So starting off draft 1-0, we're doing 3 rounds of Swiss. Round 2, I'm going up against a Vader red. So both playing red-green shells in the Vader-Luke matchup. And this is where I mentioned earlier, like, my opinion on this matchup is sort of changing a little bit. Where, going into this, I felt like I was like really favored, right? But now I'm not so sure anymore, and you'll see why. I've said it, I keep saying it. I think Vader is just like a kind of a snowball leader. He really needs that snowball effect to stay ahead of things. And with initiative, my opponent will go ahead and play a TIE Bomber, which is definitely his best turn 1 play for me. And I'll play my indirect turn 1 play as well. TIE Bomber is definitely stronger than the Y-Wing here. They're both dealing 3 indirect damage, but I think just that having all 4 of his stats on the tail rather than the front seems better than a 1-3. 0-4 seems better than a 1-3 with both having 3 indirect damage. You can see I've got the shoot down in my hand. I don't have any way to deal with that. And then, he shoots down me first. And this, like, right as that happens, honestly, I feel like that move already has drastically shaped this game to where, like, my turn 1 play is removed. He gets to swing in indirect here. I have, if I want any chance of coming back, I kind of have to, like, take that, and then he gets to make his tie. So it already feels like turn 2, that first action of turn 2, I feel like is, in this matchup, it almost feels like the game decides right there. Now, if I were playing, like, if these were constructed decks and I had, like, ECL, there's ways I could maybe bring back the momentum here. With initiative, I'll go ahead and just trade into that tie. Don't want him piloting anything, even though he's probably going to pilot that TIE Bomber anyways. Definitely don't want the spaceboard to snowball with a whole bunch of ties. So get in some on base, and then I play the K-Wing. That's good for me to see on the board. And he's going to play that shuttle, 3/4 shielded, pretty gnarly. And I'm holding the shoot down in my hand. I have no shoot down targets. I can swing the Saboteur into the shuttle to take it out and survive. But I am also... I may have even forgotten about that. I'm not sure I did that optimally. I've got lots of removal in my hand. I think I just resourced one. Yeah, I definitely should have first action just swung into this thing and taken it out. But I think instead I kind of get a little cheeky here. Oh, he's got first action anyways, so yeah, I'm taking all that indirect to base. I don't hoping that when I flip Luke that I'll have some sort of chance to bring it back. Splash in that thing to deal 2 damage to that and exhaust it. It just pops the shield, but still gets to exhaust. And Vader gets to make the tie. Putting the twin laser turret on the K-Wing, so it gets a stat buff, and then we'll start to throw around some damage, and now that spaceport starts to look pretty nasty with the 5.5 frigate. So right here I'm going to swing the K-Wing into the bomber, take no damage back, and then I'll be able to ping that tie away and then ping the frigate for 1. So starting to come back a little bit, although I know he gets to flip Vader onto that frigate, and it's going to be like a 10-10 with Overwhelm Raid 1. That's going to be pretty nasty. Not very much I can do about that. And I believe he still has initiative. So that is definitely going to be a problem. And he decides to just trade here anyways. You can pilot Vader on the other thing and still have a pretty commanding board. And now I have no options to pilot Luke onto. If I play something to pilot Luke onto, it's just going to get mowed over by Vader. So I don't want to lose my leader super early like that. I have no removal options for a 4 toughness. And now here comes Vader and 2 ties. And here comes the snowball, really. There's nothing I can do to get rid of that. Those ties. Oh, shout out to Jesse for the weekly plays. Play Sabine there. Maybe that's enough of a distraction for him, or maybe he'll try to swing into Sabine. If it survives, and I can attack with it, and yeah, piercing shot immediately. That pretty much does it for me. There's no hope for me to come back in this situation. I don't have any. I can piercing shot and just put 3 onto it. He's trying to decide if he wants to go ahead and flip in Vader or attack him with Vader, and he will. Puts me to 18, and then he throws down the Sentinel, so it's slowed me down another action. I lose this game. There's nothing I can do about that. And I won game 1, and then he took 2 games in a row with Vader. So it really just feels, it feels like the snowball effect happens very fast for this particular matchup. And I go on to round 3. So round 3, I'm back to Wedge as my opponent. This time it is in the yellow shell, so expecting a little bit more tempo here. Obviously, holding on to those same removal cards. And, I think tempo-wise, I'm not totally sure that I can just race a Wedge yellow, depending on what he's got cooking in there. He's going to start with initiative and start with a Vulture Droid. And I know, ideally he's pulled a free pilot with Wedge. And so I'm going to go ahead and shoot that down just to prevent any sort of piloting shenanigans. And, feels all right for me. Takes out his turn 1 play and pushes across some damage. So I have no regrets not playing a turn 1 unit. Especially, I think my turn 1 unit might have been an A-Wing. So something that'll just trade into that doesn't feel good. He's going to play salvage, bring back the vulture droid with 1 damage on it. And yeah, like I said, I don't want to play something that's just going to get, you know, if he pilots something and then that trades into it. So yeah, he gets an R2 pilot. So now that's like a 3-3 with, so a 3-2 basically. And I claim early here, knowing that I have a response for this. Really just trying not to give Wedge any wind behind him to build up that nasty spaceport. Really slow down the pilot strategy, make it so he has to put it on exhausted stuff. So I system shock the vulture droid for 1, defeats the R2 upgrade, and then does 1 damage to the vulture droid and removes it. So 1 cost removal here to start the phase feels pretty nice for me. And he's going to play Poe and do the Poe shenanigans and pilot that on an X-Wing. Pretty sweet play for him. Plays nice and on curve. And trying to figure out what I want to do here. I'll just play the A-Wing. He'll take initiative and we'll go to the next phase. I think we're going to 5 resources here. So he's got, because of Poe, he does not have an option for Wedge to flip onto and attack this phase. That being said, Poe is pretty gnarly. Let's see what Mike does here to start us off. Plays 1 for the electromagnetic pulse, removes the A-Wing. Solid play. And I'm going to pay 5 for blue leader here and just keep the XP on. And I'm just going to put a ton of pressure on the ground board here. And the tactical fighter will still work with blue leader. Obviously, they're not in space, but it is a fighter unit. He'll swing in 4 with Poe, and I just get to claim initiative here. Knowing that I'm going to be able to flip Luke onto blue leader, have a, let's see, a 9-10 that I can swing in for 11 with that tactical officer. He decides to bring out red leader, but does not deploy Wedge. And I'm in a position here where it feels like I can start running away with this game. Hopefully I don't have to deal with any gnarly pilot situations here. You can see I've got a shoot down and a piercing shot, it looks like. I've also got that saboteur. So Luke's going on the blue leader. Things could definitely start getting out of hand for me. Or for him, I guess. Now he flips Wedge. And doesn't make his token. Play the hot shot maneuver here. Deal 2 damage to Poe. And then with Luke's ability, deal some more and remove Poe. So that kind of worked out. And we get to swing in for 9. Doesn't get the buff from the officer, and then he'll swing in with his leader. I'll play my sentinel or my saboteur 4/4, and he's gonna play the restore. So nice play for him, hoping to stabilize. It'll probably keep me from swinging in first action, and he gives it a pilot. So now it's a 5/6 restore 2. Definitely is trying to make up some ground with that spaceport. Use the officer to trade up the K-Wing into that 5/6, so he'll lose that piloted unit and I feel pretty okay about that. He'll bring in Leia, so that'll get a nice buff and a restore. And I'll go ahead and swing in my 9 to base and throw 3 damage at his leader. Trying to decide if he wants to claim or play another card. I believe he claims here. And I'll go ahead and just dump my hand and play another Saboteur and an ambush to put some more damage into his leader. And if he has no way, he's at 19. If he has no way to pump all the way to 13 damage on an attack or deal with my leader, throw a Sentinel out there or something, then I do have lethal with the officer buff. It'll be, or not even with, I think even without that, I've got lethal showing, and that does it. So it just shows you the versatility of blue leader. Really nice to play around Luke with that. You know, gives you an option to just create something huge on the ground that still gets all of the benefits of Luke. Feels really nice. And so we go. Jump to the next video. So we go 2-1 for draft with Luke. Like I said, I think he's a particularly strong leader. I'm doing another draft tomorrow. See how that goes. Yeah, I'll see you guys then.